Okay, so this session is about giving feedback on the situation where after every task the teacher says, what's the answer to number one? What's the answer to number two? What's the answer to number three? Etc. Okay, so before we go on, there's full support materials. There's a complete handout at bellhop.com. You can find things to say in this situation in my book, The Masterclass TESOL Lesson Observation. And you'll also see supporting courses on YouTube about different things like the role of the teacher. Okay, but this is designed for experienced teachers giving feedback to other teachers. Okay, so in the observation, what you will have seen is essentially the teacher sets up the task, which can be very well done. Students get on with it. The teacher waits until they've finished. Teacher's at the front of the class and then says, for the feedback, what's the answer to number one? What's the answer to number two? No, that's not right. What's the answer to number three? Etc. So there's this model of task setup, students do, feedback goes back to the front, which is incredibly popular, incredibly common, and not a sign of very advanced teaching. Let's go that way. So generally, students give answers individually in open class. They may have done some pair checking before the open class feedback, maybe not. Okay, the feedback takes a long time, so pace and engagement drop off. So what tends to happen is I will say, what's the answer to number one? Student says A. What's the answer to number two? B. And which time somebody will have not heard or have tried to correct answer number one, so they fall behind. So they say to their mate, what was the answer to number two again? I missed that, sorry. Who then they both miss the answer to number three. And quite often with this kind of feedback, you either have to go very slow, repeating yourself a lot of the time, or there's absolute chaos by the end of it. And as a teacher, you're not sure quite where the chaos points are. So it's not very effective. So your challenge is to give supportive, actionable feedback. So let me clarify the problems with sequential feedback. So as I've shown, it's not always effective. Not everyone will have got the correct answers. And often you'll see just students give up and think, oh, I'll check later. Or it doesn't really matter, so I'm not going to bother. It's inefficient, it's slow. And for the amount of time spent on it sometimes, it's just low task value. It's not worth the time being spent on it. Added to the problem, what often happens is, so I'll say, Alex, what's the answer to number two? Alex says B, and I will then give a commentary about why that's wrong. I might expand on the answer, might do all sorts of things. And what's happening now is it's getting very, very confused. We've lost the aim of the task, which was to synthesize down, give students practice and identify what they don't need. The feedback has become much longer and it's become a sort of micro teaching where it may not be what's actually needed. And it can make classroom management difficult. So you've got the students who are off task, you've got some who don't, the students who want to have everything correct and will keep it, the students who don't care because they realise that no one's going to follow up on this anyway. So classroom management can be quite mucky and difficult with this. And I have to say sometimes it's necessary and sometimes it's really, really useful. My point is that it's not always a good thing. And there are lots of alternatives that are much more effective, increase learning and, importantly, increase student feedback. Okay, so from the learner's point of view, for the students who've got everything right, they're bored, they're disengaged, they're wasting time. The students who made errors can be embarrassed when they're exposed publicly. I'm the only one who didn't get number 5 wrong. Great, I'm not going to put my hand up for that. In fact, if I'm truly honest, I'll probably lie and pretend I got it right. I'm not going to expose myself willingly as what I think is probably the only person in the class that didn't get it right. I mean, in fact, probably lots have got it wrong, but I'm not going to put my head above the parapet. Students who didn't finish are anxious, they're not following along, they also feel exposed, they haven't got even the wrong answers, they've got no answers. And the whole class often is waiting, they're not learning, they're waiting for everyone to finish and get answers. And the teacher's working very hard to get through material, but it's all very unfocused. Okay, so why it happens? A teacher wants to be fair, they may be nominating, different students. What have you got? What's your answer? They want students to be accountable for their answers, so that they know who's right and who's wrong. There's a sense of thoroughness, do the job properly. A lot of teachers like it as it's definitely a point of control. It's a very powerful position. I've got the answers and I'm going to tell you if you're right or wrong. Authority, power sit with me. They reinforce my notions of what a good teacher is. And I like the feeling of it. And it might just be habit. We get into habits. It's very easy to get into this kind of habit. I always do it that way. It works. Students know what's going on. I don't need to change it. So sequential feedback happens for different reasons. Okay, so when can you see that it's not effective? When is it sequential feedback inefficient? So teacher is not engaged with learners whilst they're on the task. Now, there's a lot of argument to say, let students get on with it, don't interfere. I don't agree. We see teachers set up a task, stand at the front, and they, looking at their notes or doing the register or whatever. And they should be out there identifying where the students have problems, identifying who's doing well, who needs to be pushed a bit, who needs a bit of support to keep up, where are the problematic areas, are they across the class, or does Alex have an answer that could give they could give to Max, and then that's resolved. So it's inefficient. The teacher's not working appropriately. But I do agree that the teacher has to work that fine art of assessment, monitoring what's going on here with not interfering. So that's the whole about moving your body side on, walking behind the students. I usually have a pencil. For the stronger students, I underline where the error is. I'll come back to that in a minute. Okay, watch out. Is the task feedback time longer than the time actually spent on the task? If it is, something's really wrong. And this happens a lot, that the feedback can be equivalent to the on-task time. The teacher's not able to discriminate because they haven't monitored, because there's a bit of chaos, they can't work out what the key or vital issues are that the actual class is having. So, and then they give feedback on feedback. So that's when it really spins out of control. The teacher's eliciting answers that's wrong. They go back into a reteach, and it may only be the one student that needs it. And also the reteach tends to be done on the hoof, and is very ineffective and confusing. So, does the teacher adapt the sequence based on responses or follow the exercise rigidly? So, is the teacher adapting to student need that they've picked up in the monitoring? So real student need, or are they just going through the task? Okay, so 3 of you got it wrong, 5 of you got it right. That's great. Move on. Let's try the next one. So look at it's all down to engagement. Is the teacher supporting individuals whilst they're on task? I mean, this is a great time to really get in and support individual students. It's precious time, especially in a class when you're trying to balance all the different needs. And are students actually noting the corrections? Often they're not. They're just like, because they get that nothing's going to happen with it anyway. Okay. So how can you support the teacher? Okay, first, and I'll say this in everything, get the teacher's perspective. On bellhop.com, you'll see teacher reflection document. Get the teacher to write the feedback on the lesson before you give the feedback. This will tell you, are they aware of the issue, to what level, and where and how you can pitch your feedback. If they're to the moon, sometimes what I might do is write a few guiding questions on the feedback document. I either give it back to them and say, have a think about these, because this is what we're going to talk about. You know, I want the teacher, I don't want to spring some sort of nasty surprise on the teacher. So I try to make it as easy as possible. But the reflection document is key for you as an observer. Okay. You've got to consider the experience and context. If they're a new teacher, wow, you know, they've set up tasks, they've got students on task, they're doing feedback. That's a great start. That's actually, you know, people struggle with that. So you're going to offer gentle guidance on alternative methods. It's time to start raising the bar. Great. Experienced teachers, they may be a bit more resistant to change. You know, they may see that they've mastered feedback. They don't want to necessarily vary the role of teacher. They like it. You know, it's great being the one with the answers. I'm right, and I'm going to tell you if you're wrong or not. So you want to build your case with evidence. So the things that you can record and analyse are measure how long each task time took and how long the feedback was. I don't know, I would expect a sort of 80-20 kind of balance really. Although if the task picks up a major problem and the teacher, you know, we're teaching the students, not the plan. So that's fine. That's absolutely great. The teacher has assessed through monitoring exactly what's needed and responded appropriately. Fantastic. Look at what the students are actually doing during feedback. Are they actually attentive? Are they correcting their work? Are they making note of it, or are they just letting it go? Go back to the plan. Often this is a problem of aims. The teacher's not really clear of the aim of what they're doing. So if they're not clear of the aims, they kind of go all over the place. They get pulled around by different things, different students. They think that they have to answer questions that are not necessarily the prime focus of the lesson. So look at, does their stage aim match their activity? Is the time given appropriate? And have they accounted for the feedback? Often, for example, in a controlled practice task, they won't actually be aware of what element the controlled practice is testing or practicing. So, you know, is it verb transformation, or is it finding sounds that are similar or whatever? So often controlled practice teachers, new teachers particularly, are not sure why they're doing it. They just kind of know that they've got to do it. Note what the teacher was doing during the task. Was the teacher aware of the students? Was the teacher present to the students, assessing, monitoring, supporting? Okay. So I'd like to talk about viral feedback. I'm not sure there's another name for it, so I've always thought viral feedback is. So standard feedback is, here's a task, get into pairs or on your own, do the task, now tell me what your answers are and I'll correct. Viral feedback's slightly different. So, time and pencils, let me explain. So you put your students on task, always give them some time in order to generate information or answers before you go over. Because if you haven't started generating, so yes, you put your students on task and you monitor to make sure that they're on task. Have they got it? Yeah, that's okay. They're all on it. They know what to do. Then give them a few moments in order to generate some answers. And this is where I always have a pencil in my class. So I'll go round and I know, you know your students. I'll know my best students. So I may, with my pencil, underline for the best students the errors. So have a look at this. I don't give any more information than that. So that's level 1 of feedback. challenging. The next students, they're okay, but they struggle a bit. So with my pencil, I might underline where the problems are, and then I might give a clue. So, okay, so look at the verb form of this, or I think about using the infinitive there. So I would give more information. I'd give clues. Okay. So my objective is to try and spread the knowledge across the room. Now I come to the third group and they're really struggling. They're in the wrong level or they're having a bad day or whatever. So what I tend to do is I might even give them the answers. So I might say, look, let's talk about a 10-piece control practice. So I might write in a few answers for the most complex ones, the ones that I've seen the top group struggling with. Okay. So I'll say, look, I've done this. See if using those models, you can try a few more by yourself. So through differential feedback, I've got the answers are in the room more or less. At which point I might go back to the good ones and I'll say, okay, you've got, this is correct. These are all correct. Just to have a look at those two. The top group finish, but they can't quite get those two right. However, the weakest group, I've given those answers to. And then I mix them up. So I change the pairings. So the weaker ones have got something to offer the stronger ones. And I also make the proviso that they have to explain. So I say at the end, Max, help Alex with the answers. Alex, if you can't answer the questions, I'm going to blame Max. But you need to kind of give permission for peer teaching. A lot of cultures kind of resist it. They think that it's not their place to teach or it looks big-headed. So a little bit of pushing helps. Okay. So through this monitoring, I've worked out that of the 10 questions, question 2 and 3 are the struggles. So I may have spread the answers across the room. I know that the correct answers are in the room, but I might come back to the one and say, okay, I want to look at number 2 and 3. Okay. Go back and do the teaching on 2 and 3. And then always, and this is the bit that people forget when they're doing viral feedback, check 2 things. So are there any questions? Has everybody feel that they've got all the answers? Or anybody missing any answers? No? Okay, great. So, and then let's use that information in order to. So students, remember, really good teachers demonstrate why the students have done a task and what they're going to do with it. So differentiated feedback is happening while they're on task. It's very skillful. The role of the teacher definitely changes. You go out of the sort of power role of, oh, that's wrong, or the answer to number 2 is and you become much more the facilitator. You're low-key judging, you're a font, you're inputting all the time where it's needed based on assessment gained through the monitoring. This way you distill the problems down to the essentials. Okay. And that's where you spend your time, where it's needed. Just remember that you do need to close off viral feedback. It's quite easy to sort of think, okay, so everybody's got the answers, but just check it. So does everybody feel they've got the answers? Any questions? Okay, so now we will with this information. So just note that the closing off when we're working with new teachers tends to be the bit that's forgotten. And they'll say things like, oh, but I knew they all had the answers. You might know, but they need to know it as well. Okay. Alternative ways to give feedback. Put the answers on the board or a handout. Always peer check small groups. Again, if you're onto it, the teacher will create the groups in such a way as there's a lot of shared information. Use technology. Instant polling is great if you're working online. There's lots of quiz apps, Kahoots, Quizlets. Look at that, where students write the task answers on there and then compare. delayed. You can always pull in the homework and look at it later. Or tell them. Just tell them the answers. It's a good method. It's fine as long as it's done, with an understanding of what is going on and what the aim is. Okay, so your goal isn't to overwhelm, but to plant growth. For the inexperienced teacher, little steps. You won't change everything overnight. Okay. So new observers, what the struggle that they have is that thinking that at the front, what's the answer feedback, sequential feedback is efficient and organised. And yet for a new teacher, it is, but it's not the optimal for effectiveness. They think that the task feedback is well managed. Yes, but it's low value. Some observers believe in their heart of hearts that it's what a teacher does. It's the role of the teacher. In that case, you want to have a conversation about efficiency and aims and being effective. Okay, final works. I like it. Be kind. Observed teachers really struggle. It's really horrible being observed. Remember that change is incremental. Look at Bellhop for notes of sample things to say and feedback. And remember to follow up a few days later. Any luck with that viral feedback? Are you struggling with it? Did you find it work? Was it taking more time, less time? Did you notice that students were more engaged or not? And good luck. Observing lessons is hard. It's a massive responsibility and you want to do it right. So reach out if we can help you at all. It's really interesting. I'm very selfish. I like making these videos and I'm happy to make them if you feel there's a subject you would like covered. Okay, thank you very much.